In today's episode, party every night for a year? Okay. Fired from last job, but I got the last laugh. Renege once the job's done? Prepare for your just desserts. So let's get started. Party every night for a year? Okay. I went to school in California in the 90s. I bought a house 4 years ago in a quiet neighborhood. I had wanted to get into that neighborhood for years. My best friend lives there. It was a couple blocks from my kids' school. It was a good neighborhood. Then COVID hit. My neighbors across the street were forced to move at the beginning of the pandemic before the eviction moratorium was in place. They were really good neighbors. We were friendly with each other, and we were sad to see them go. So when the property owner rented to a new family, we were hoping we could cultivate a friendly relationship. Unfortunately, that was not the case. About a month after they moved and the lockdown started. And that's when things went from 0 to 100 real quick. For the next year, every night there was a huge party. Cars down the street, music so loud you could hear it over regular house noise in every room in my house. My friend in the next cul-de-sac would text me regularly if the music he was hearing was my neighbor's. We tried to be civil. I asked politely. I brought them beer. I offered some killer 420. Eventually they threatened me and my wife, so we started calling the police. Almost every night for 4 months. We organized with the neighbors. And they started calling the police as well. Eventually the others gave up and started selling their houses because the renters were just that bad. We were still upside down on our place, so it wasn't an option for us. Eventually the police told me that I needed to stop calling, and that it wasn't their issue to deal with. That I was a bigger nuisance than the renters' music. It was at that time the housing market was taking off. Houses were selling in my area for 40-50K over appraisal value. My wife and I looked at what we needed to make so we could move and listed our home for that. In 3 days we had a handful of obscene offers to choose one. But it was the lowest offer that stood out to us the most. Their offer was a good 20K under the next lowest, but they sent a letter. I'm a sucker for a letter, especially one with a picture of a young pregnant couple and a dog. And a patrol car? Turns out the young man is a police officer newly appointed at the local PD. And he takes his patrol car home. I knew at that point that this was the family to sell my house to, money be damned. I moved out as the neighbors were throwing a huge party. The next day the police moved in, and they haven't had another since. I drive by regularly on my way to my buddy's place. They just sit quietly in their garage looking bored. I make sure I honk and wave every time. Fired from last job, but I got the last laugh. Pardon the format, I am on mobile. I worked at a retail chain that sold pet supplies and products. When I started working there, it was great, family owned, and everyone I worked with was fantastic. The owners eventually wanted to retire and sold the small chain to an investment group. Once the investment group took over, almost all but a few employees were let go, forced out, or just quit. I hung on for a little while longer before I got promoted at my other job. New company brings in new manager to my store. My store was the top performing store in the entire chain, bringing in about $10,000 to $12,000 per day on average. It was always more on weekends and especially around the holidays. The new manager is a Mr. Company man. Company told him they only want employees around for 2 to 3 years. Myself and 2 others had been there 10 plus years. So naturally he began ruffling feathers and giving us all a hard time. Unfortunately he decided on me first. Mr. Company man found out I worked 2 jobs. The 2 jobs are not in related fields, so there was no chance of any conflicts of interest on my end. However, my second job requires me to work nights and weekends. When Mr. Company man found this out, he demanded I work nights/weekends there, so it was fair for everyone. I didn't work nights and weekends there because I was that store's only OSHA certified forklift operator, and deliveries didn't come at night, they came weekday mornings, every day. Mr. Company Man didn't want to hear that, and told me I either had to work nights and weekends, or that day would be my last day. I told him, don't threaten me with a good time, I suppose today is my last day then. I was pretty pissed about that, but it's not a big deal now, ended up being the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I went home early, didn't finish my shift, because F***CKM. But when I got home I decided to call my local OSHA inspector and report them for not having a certified operator on staff, as well as numerous other hazards. Needless to say, they lost close to 3 weeks' profit from all the violations the inspector found. I was surprised they even showed up. In my state, the inspector will call you back after an inspection and tell you if your claims were founded or not. Mine were. And Mr. Company Man got his ass chewed out so bad he ended up quitting. Renege once the job's done? Prepare for your just desserts. A few years after I started my business, I was asked to clean up and optimize a number of PCs in multiple locations, as well as set up some forms and templates for a new client who owned a local restaurant. The work, all labor apart from a little travel, was performed over the space of a month due to scheduling conflicts and school holidays, but on completing the last of it, the client confirmed verbally that he was happy with all I'd done, and to go ahead and send an invoice. I duly emailed an invoice for a sum just in excess of £400. I waited for payment, never heard anything, sent reminder emails, called and left messages, but no response. Eventually a couple of busy months had passed, and I met the client by chance in the local supermarket. On asking why he'd not paid or been in touch, he said that all the PCs were as bad as they had been before I'd started, and that he had tried to contact me with no success. As my landline and mobile phone had caller display as well as answering services, and there had been no emails, I knew the latter was BS, and as any PC user knows, a system can easily go back to pot if the user bad habits don't change. So I contacted a local debt collector, gave him the details, printouts of my call logs and post-invoicing emails, and he took them to the restaurateur. On his return, his words were he's not disputing the invoice, he's saying that the work wasn't done right, so it's his word against yours. I queried if it was worth taking the guy to small claims, to which the debt collector said even if you could prove he confirmed he was satisfied with the work, they might insist you get his computers back to their pre-invoice state again. Do you really want to spend more time doing that? Of course the answer was no, so I stewed it over in my mind and came up with a plan. At this point it was late November, so, creating 2 throwaway email accounts in female names, I got in touch with the restaurant to book a large party for Valentine's night the following February. I put it down as my husband's surprise 40th birthday party, confirmed that my husband's sister, and CC'd her in the message with the other throwaway, couldn't make the journey north, but would happily pay the £10 per head deposit as her share towards the night. Of course, as time went on the ideas grew arms and legs. The numbers attending increased, until the owner suggested he'd reserve the whole restaurant for the evening, and they'd happily arrange the seating to suit us. But could I ensure the deposit was sorted ASAP, please? Of course I confirmed that the sister was a scatterbrain and that I'd ensure the check was with him very soon. He emailed the sister using the CC address and she confirmed it had been posted. To keep him on side, I asked for a proposed menu in advance so that I could send it to all the attendees for pre-ordering. Naturally they were delighted that they'd know this, as it makes their life much easier. Consequently, the numbers for all 3 courses were emailed in with a few fussy eater variables thrown in for good measure. Needless to say, by the beginning of February, he was getting quite antsy about there being no sign of the deposit, but I reassured him that the sister's check must have been lost in the post, so she'd send another by special delivery, if they could ensure someone was there to sign for it. I knew the owner lived about 25 miles away, and the restaurant didn't open till 5 p.m., so he'd have to come in very early and hang around waiting for it. A week before D-Day, and he'd obviously had enough. He emailed in a spat saying they'd turned away numerous inquiries, had no deposit, and could no longer hold back on taking other bookings. This time I didn't bother replying. My part was done. My wife, at the time, and I were booked in at another restaurant close by for our own Valentine's meal, after which we took a walk past the restaurateur's business premises to see just 2 cars in their parking lot, one of which was his. I'm not sure how much he must have lost out on that night, but knowing his prices I'd bet it was significantly more than the £400 plus I'd invoiced him. Of course, lessons were learned by me too: get written or emailed confirmation of job satisfaction for one, and not letting new clients go unbilled for too long was another. Naturally, I had no hesitation letting all and sundry know how he'd behaved either, so he was blacklisted, or forced to pay upfront for any work, by IT and other professionals I knew locally. Thanks for watching.